It's time for the 1430 Connection on 1430 WNAV and 99.9 FM, spotlighting news, newsmakers, and important community issues. Now, with this week's edition of the 1430 Connection, here is WNAV news anchor Donna Cole.
Welcome to the 1430 Connection. I'm Donna Cole. In the studio with me today is Detective Dan Dickey and Detective Bernard Adkins III. They are with the Anne Arundel County Police Department. Thank you both for joining me today.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
The topic, it is a topic we need to talk about. It's human trafficking. And for those that don't know what human trafficking is, it is a situation in which an individual is compelled to work or engage in commercial sex through the use of force, fraud, or coercion. If the individual is under the age of 18 and engaging in commercial sex, they are experiencing regardless if force, fraud, or coercion is also taking place. This is an area both Detective Dickey and Detective Adkins know well about, yes?
Yes.
Yes.
How long have you been investigating crimes involving human trafficking in Anne Arundel County? First, Detective Dickey.
Since 2009, so going on 8 years.
So this is not a new thing?
No.
Why are we hearing more about it now?
Educational awareness.
Okay.
Different social media outlets are picking up on it. Different organizations and groups. I think is why you're hearing more about it, and it just was like a snowball that just started downhill, and now it's an avalanche.
Detective Adkins, how long have you been in the business of investigating these crimes?
Since 2011.
This is a disgusting crime because of the kids involved, because people being held against their will. How do you deal with this at the end of the day, both of you? Let's start with you, Detective Adkins.
I think just taking some time to decompress, some time to myself away from that is a good thing. And just family time, my local church, those are ways that I personally handle it.
And Detective Dickey?
It's a lot of decompression time. It's a lot of sense of humor with it. At some point, you have to laugh at it and just, try to put it in the back. A lot of outdoor activities, a lot of coaching of youth sports and stuff like that.
All right. Talk to me about February 22nd, 2018.
That is the Andre Pleasant case?
Yes.
That actually started out as a standard investigation. We were surfing escort ads online, which is what we do. We go through a variety of different escort ads through web pages. We responded to an escort advertisement that took us to a local hotel around the airport.
BWI?
Yes.
Okay.
We were able to establish that once we were at the motel, the room number that they were in, so we were able to actually set up a surveillance team and watch, at which point we observed 3 females and a male going in and out of 2 different rooms.
You had surveillance outside or inside as well?
Outside.
You could. Did you try to get?
This motel had doors on the outside, so there was no need for us to be on. There is no inside. It's all outdoor rooms.
Okay.
So we were able to ascertain off of surveillance that there were at least 3 girls and 1 guy. The guy's usually the trafficker. We were able to set up a date, get the talk of sex for money, which is the prostitution charge, and then the investigation led us to Andre Pleasant.
So just like on TV, you have to wait until that conversation takes place and then you raid the
Yes.
room. Okay.
Yes.
Did you know if weapons were on site?
We did not.
Okay.
We kind of go in blind. The UC op is done. There's a rescue team, undercover operation.
Okay.
There's a rescue team for him. There's a surveillance team. On this particular operation, we had actually, once the escort gave the room number, we observed Pleasant and another female leave the area and go to a restaurant across the street. So we knew where he was at that time. So he was arrested at that point for renting the rooms. And then through interviews of the females, and then through a whole bunch of historical data on cell phones and websites and stuff, we were able to charge him with trafficking.
Was it more than just the 3 women involved from day one, or?
From day one, it was 3 women involved that he was traveling from Buffalo, New York, down. He had brought from New York down through PA down to us. From us, they were heading down to Orlando.
And why Maryland? Why Orlando?
Well, we talk a lot about why Anne Arundel County is one of the big questions we get. Understanding that although 95 does not run through us, we are directly off of 95. We have the airport. We have the major rental stations. We have the bus stops. We have everything one would need. Anne Arundel County is a little bit different in the fact that we really don't have the fly-by-night motels. We have a lot of the company and the franchised larger ones, but that doesn't seem to stop them from coming here.
One of the things that I had read that kind of explains this is the National Human Trafficking Hotline, and this echoes what you just said. Maryland's central location has facilitated its development as both a pass-through state and a destination for human traffickers. Traffickers utilize many of our highways, especially 95, to connect victims to major East Coast cities such as New York, Baltimore, Philadelphia, and Washington, D.C. Anne Arundel County, let's talk about that. Victims commonly arrive from all over the country and the world through airports like Thurgood Marshall, BWI Airport, and they're a breeding ground for human trafficking because traffickers know that Johns who travel to Maryland for business or brief meetings or conferences will engage in illicit sexual activities more willingly because of the anonymity they experience in a new location. Yes?
That was a lot.
It was.
A lot of what we also do is we go after the buyer. We go after the seller, we go after the trafficker, and we go after the buyer. So when you look at the Anne Arundel County in of itself, yes, we do have highways. We are in between Baltimore City and D.C., so we're kind of like right there in the middle. Guys can come north, guys can come south.
Is it always guys?
Typically, as far as the clientele, typically yes. There are a few girls that will do couples, or they're advertising female company. Generally what we see are the guys, and I'll let Bernie talk about that. He kind of runs the reversal side of things that we do.
We're going to come right back to this. We'll be right back on the 1430 Connection. Welcome back to the 1430 Connection. I'm Donna Cole. In the studio with me today is Detective Dan Dickey and Detective Bernard Adkins III with the Anne Arundel County Police Department. We are talking about human trafficking. Is this all you specialize in?
For the most part, yes.
Bernard.
Yes.
Let's finish up the conversation that we were just having. Is it all guys, the solicitors?
Yes. It's a question we get a lot when we do community meetings. Everybody talks about, well, what are you doing about these guys that are buying sex?
Right.
So to combat that, and as part of our education push, is we set up reversals where we'll have female officers that are undercover. We make advertisements. We put them on the same websites that traffickers are using. So, and I can tell you from my experience doing this, literally within less than a minute, guys are texting, guys are calling. So you put the advertisement there. It's got some
photos are your officers.
They're not our officers, but they look very similar. And it's got a narrative on there that says, hey, you can come hang out with me in so many words, with a contact number. So they can call or text. They can send pictures of themselves, which they regularly do. And they communicate back and forth. And if they want to come meet, we facilitate that. So they will come to the hotel where we're at, and we're monitoring the activity inside the room. And again, if they engage in prostitution inside the room with that officer, then we detain them, we identify them, and then we pursue charges through the state's attorney's office. So we can get anywhere from 1 or 2 guys in an evening, upwards of 10 to 15 guys in an evening.
With the case going back to Mr. Pleasant, that was recently adjudicated, you mentioned. And what were the results? Were there Johns that were part of that, or no?
No, there were not Johns that were necessarily identified as part of that.
Okay.
The focus on that particular case was immediately interviewing the victims, getting their stories. With that, we also provide them with contact information for local nonprofit groups. So that's
for help, to get them some help.
So we can't force them to take any of the help, but our goal is to at least say, hey, here's a local organization that is willing to help you. Reach out to them, make contact with them, and we leave it up to them. As adults, and the victims in this case were all adults, so that limits us to what we can and can't do, but we can say, hey, this is the direction we would like you to go. Stop engaging in this behavior. Stop being exploited or making yourself vulnerable to being exploited, and get that help. So the main focus was the victims for that case, and really the undercover operation proves what was going on, and then you match that up with text messages from Buffalo through Pittsburgh to here. You see the messages, you see the content on the electronic devices that clearly shows prostitution's occurring, money's being exchanged, the trafficker is taking the money, the trafficker is organizing the ads, the trafficker is even sometimes the one communicating on the phone. Whereas, the John thinks he's texting with a female, it's really the trafficker that's setting up everything.
And these women were being held against their will.
Well, that's it's a hard thing to determine, because in this particular case, in the majority of our cases, there's not that obvious physical, you can't leave, or you're shackled up, or the door is locked.
Right.
We rarely have that. That's our experience here in the county, is that it's psychological, it's emotional, it's relational. It's that type of manipulation, which in some cases is far worse. The fact that there's threats being used or assaults being used. So although the door may not be locked and chained, the victim in that case was assaulted on more than one occasion, and she felt like she couldn't leave. Yes, could she have walked out the door and asked for help? Yeah, a lot of people think she could have, but based on her relationship with the trafficker, she didn't feel comfortable doing that. She felt unsafe, that more harm would come to her, and that's what makes it so difficult.
And what was Mr. Pleasant, what was the ultimate verdict there with the sentence?
For that case, it was a guilty plea, and it was to one count of human trafficking, and the judge sentenced him to 10 years, which that was the maximum for that offense.
How much did drugs play a part in this case, or in most of the cases that you are investigating?
I would say there's an intersection of drugs in almost every case. This particular case with Mr. Pleasant, one of the victims was addicted to crack cocaine, and that was part of it. So there was homelessness involved on the part of all three victims. They didn't have a place to stay. They didn't have stable families. And at least one had this drug issue. So when you combined all that, they're looking for somebody to kind of help them. It's not the help they really need,
right.
But this person, they can get drugs, they can have a somewhat safe place to stay, and they're traveling. There's definitely an intersection with the opioid issues, as well as other drugs that we're finding almost in every case.
It's interesting because they were headed to Orlando, you said. And my image of Orlando, all of our images of Orlando is what?
Disney.
Yeah.
Which is funny you say that, because that's one of the things he had promised them, was to be able to go to Disney and see the theme park. And when you look at all these girls have some sort of vulnerability attached to them. From what we have found through interviewing these girls or these victims per se, is that the system in some context has let them down before, 90% of the time, multiple times, in which they've been promised through foster homes or social work and stuff that we'll be able to do X, Y, and Z for you. And yet that never happens. So they're running from something worse than what they're being put into with their pimp or trafficker. Because when you look at the pimp in and of himself, there's what we would call the romance pimp, or the Mac, who actually treats her like a girlfriend and gets her so emotionally evolved that, this is the guy that loves me, this is the guy that takes care of me, this is the guy who's going to make sure I'm financially sound. And that's pretty much what we see around this area. Every once in a while, we'll get a gorilla pimp who will come in and force the girl through a variety of different means.
That's who we see on TV.
That's who you see on TV.
Yeah.
We do see them here. For instance, Pleasant's girl, one of them, the day that we actually got her, had a black eye. It was fresh. It was black and purple and had been bruised. And that was a controlling strike that he did on her to control that victim, as well as the other two girls that were there, because she said she didn't want to work. So he hit her with a backhand.
It's a lot to take in, and
It
you
is.
guys see it every day. Yeah.
It is.
All right, we're going to take another short break. We'll be right back on the 1430 Connection. Welcome back to the 1430 Connection. I'm Donna Cole. In the studio with me today are Detective Dan Dickey and Detective Bernard Adkins III from the Anne Arundel County Police Department. They investigate human trafficking. If you or someone you know is in immediate danger, call 911. If you believe you are a victim of human trafficking, call the National Human Trafficking Hotline, 1-888 373-7888. You can text the Human Trafficking Hotline at 233-733. You can also chat the Human Trafficking Hotline through www.humantraffickinghotline.org/chat. Children, unfortunately, there are victims with human trafficking. Yes?
Yes.
Do we see that in Anne Arundel County?
We see it in some cases, yes. When you look at the statistics or you look at the different language of what a child is, majority of what Anne Arundel County sees is between 18 and 24 years of age. But when you actually sit down and talk with that 18-year-old, because of the life she, and we're going to use she a lot, it does occur with the male side for boys also, but predominantly what we deal with are the females. So she has been dealt such a terrible life that though she is 18, her mindset may only be 12 or 11, or that's what she knows. So there's still the balance of what's considered a child.
Right.
Majority, again, what we see is 18 to 24. Although our youngest that we've actually rescued and had a successful prosecution on the trafficker was 11 years old.
Oh, my God.
Our oldest, I believe, was near 62 years old. And they're all pushed by individuals, again, either through force or through some sort of emotional turmoil that has occurred.
According to the National Human Trafficking Hotline, these are statistics current as of 6/30/2018. These are Maryland-specific cases. So since 2007, 3,729 calls about human trafficking, total cases 974. Year 2018, again, this only goes through June, so this is year 2018, 170 calls, 72 human trafficking cases, adults 39, minors 27, 11 years old.
Yes.
That's got to get to you, right?
It does. That was a few years back, and she was 11 years old. Mom was a single mom working multiple jobs, and she ran into this guy who was out of Glen Burnie, who offered to take her shopping and buy her new shoes and clothes, and she said okay. He then ended up taking her to he was like a real estate maintenance guy for a large community of homes, and he was able to take her to a home that was up for sale and vacant, and promised her this house that had a movie theater, spiral staircase, swimming pool, that if she made more money than what his other girls did, then she could have this house. And by the time we rescued her, all she wanted to do was take me to go see her house. She would tell me that, my house has a movie theater, my house has this, we can watch movies. Talks about how when she was locked in the hotel room, all she could watch was SpongeBob, and she didn't know what a condom was, so she actually ripped the condoms open and blew them up like balloons, and was using them in that nature. And we actually located and rescued her out of Laurel, because the trafficker had left her at the hotel, and she was able to use the hotel room phone to call her mom and say, I want to come home.
Sorry. Citizenship. Foreign nationals, 15 U.S. citizens involved, 8. These are these cases back in 2018. Is this what you're seeing too, or is it a mix of both?
As far as foreign nationals?
Yeah.
Bernard?
It can be a mix. We deal with mainly around hotels. That's primarily where we see this occurring. Somebody posts an ad online. They're typically staying at a hotel. Sometimes they're staying at an apartment that's either rented, and sometimes they're even staying at their own house that they live in, and bring these strangers in to meet them. So as far as actual trafficking cases where we're able to identify a trafficker and prosecute, we don't see very many of those cases involving foreign nationals.
Okay.
We do see other cases where maybe there's prostitution occurring, but because of multiple issues, cooperation, we need to have a victim cooperate. They need to tell us their story and be able to help identify who this person or group of people are. So if there are issues that they don't want to cooperate, or they just don't know, then that's as far as the case can go.
One of the recommendations of the work group to study safe harbor policy for youth victims of human trafficking going back to 2015 and the 2016 report was requiring human traffic awareness training for all entry-level law enforcement officers, followed up by mandated in-service training for all sworn law enforcement officers. You now have that, right?
Yes, we have the training. The mandated training for our in-service that actually start this year. Our in-services are now in progress, and they are being taught about the signs and awareness of trafficking. As you're aware, our high schools have school resource officers, as well as I believe our middle schools. They are all trained and shown to see what the actual signs of trafficking are in case they run into a problem there. We have received multiple calls from our school resource officers saying, hey, something about this isn't quite right. And we'll go out and look and see what's actually going on. Sometimes it's just family problems. Sometimes it's just a younger girl with an older boyfriend. We also train with the airport and all the hotels around there. We actually go in and offer training to all the hotels as far as their front desk staff, their room services, their maintenance guys, to see what they will see as what would be clues or signs that they have some sort of an issue. And I say issue because although something may represent as a trafficking or prostitution case, the element of drugs and prostitution and trafficking all kind of look the same. So it's not until we actually get in there and start investigating whether we may have a narcotics problem, we may have a prostitution problem. There are times where we've had a credit card making theft scheme problem. So once we get in there and the hotels call us, that's what we do. As well as we're also, all of the Anne Arundel County fire and paramedics are being trained through instructional, where we go out and we talk to them about the signs of trafficking and what to look for, because we found that a lot of the medical issues that girls are being trafficked will present on their first call before they get taken to the hospital, and then they can give us a heads up of what they've seen and notes and stuff that we can go back and actually investigate and see what's there.
Is there any advice to parents you can offer, and any tips that might help protect their kids?
When we talk to these community groups and stuff, and of course it's parents, and what can we do, what are we doing, what's going on, and I think one of the number one things we tell them is, you need to, as us being an older generation, you need to step into their world and learn what that cell phone will do.
Right.
You need to learn what all those social media apps will do, what all the hidden lockers do, and do you understand what Snapchat truly is and what it does? Right. Because those are all recruiting tools, and those are all things that recruit and will lead somebody to your daughter. If she were to put up on a social media tagline, I hate my parents, I want to leave, the amount of contacts she'll get just off that tagline from guys that are like, okay, where do you want to go, is unbelievable. And you now have the ability of a guy in California talking to a girl in Maryland, and then being able to arrange transportation back.
Gentlemen, I can't thank you enough for doing what you do.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for being here. This is Donna Cole on the 1430 Connection. We will see you next week.